Hey, how we doing, everybody? Welcome back. Got a very, very, very simplified intro to rock out to here as we my buddy Chris likes it. Fucking smooth tunes. I tried to simplify the intro just to make things go a little bit faster, but I like to have that soft little buffer at the beginning. So stream goes live, it pings everybody, and then everybody can get in here and it's good. We're ready to rock. And new table. This thing's real fancy. Solid wood, and by that I mean it's MDF, but it's double stacked MDF on top. Just this tabletop, which is 6 feet, and then 2 feet at the skinny side and 3 feet in the middle. So it's got this nice news anchor desk format to it. So now we're kind of facing each other, but we're still facing the camera, and it just, for me, it's a much more natural. It just works. It's nice. Although I can clearly tell we're not centered on this, so I'll have to figure out the spacing and positioning on it and everything. But I am beyond excited. I've been talking about having this table built for well over a year now. And my buddy Chris, who's in the background helping to manage the stream, I can't see him or can't hear him. He built it for me, and it came out freaking phenomenal. And then we painted it up and straight rock. So the good news too with this is that should not be loud whatsoever. Even just hitting the table, there's only a little bit. Versus that plastic table we were using. If anybody bumped it, it's like boom,
which is me constantly.
Yeah. Or that one stream you were doing, you're literally drumming on it.
Something. Yeah.
So, table by Megabass.
I wish.
No, actually, it's not. Oh, yeah, I understand. Yeah, it's nice. I gotta say, it's freaking sturdy. It was a pain in the ass to move in here because we're trying to find collapsible legs. Couldn't find anything that was sturdy enough, so I got these like fancy friggin' trapezoidal legs underneath, and then I couldn't get in the house. So I had to take them back off and reassemble it back in the room. But very, very happy. So this was another big step forward. Wall is still blank until a new banner is made, which we'll also use for the expos this year. We will be at the New England Fishing Expo, and what town they moved it? It's on the tip of my tongue.
Boxborough?
No, it was Boxborough. They moved down.
Marlborough?
Yes, thank you. Marlborough, Mass, and then the New Hampshire Outdoor Expo in Milford, New Hampshire. Last weekend of January, basically in between the Pro Bowl weekend and the Super Bowl weekend. Or no, it is Pro Bowl weekend? Yeah. So you don't miss any NFL stuff, which is awesome of Dan to have timed it like that. And then sometime in March, I can't remember, but the New Hampshire Outdoor Expo. And be there for both. Should be good. Marlboro. Thank you.
I didn't expect that today I would hear the word trapezoidal.
Trapezoidal, but they
Trapezoidal.
are. They are trapezoidal. You're right, though. It's not a word that would typically come into your everyday conversation.
I was not expecting it, yeah.
I mean, it is for me now because my kid is at that point with his math. And he asked me for help on one. And it was solve for t equals 1/500 times d. I'm like, okay, I kind of remember how to do this, but I don't remember how to do this. And I had to go back and relearn it for myself. Basic algebra, but it is what it is. Nice shirts. So
damn right.
Where we spend all your money on JDM baits. So I had not changed from work by the time he came over, and I saw he was still wearing his fancy work polo. So I just decided, what the hell, leave my work shirt on.
That's right.
Look fancy for y'all tonight. But let's not burn too much time. There's nothing to talk about for me for a weekend fishing report. You didn't get out either, did you?
Pumpkin Fest.
Pumpkin Fest. And you know what? I saw it. I'm going to put it up there.
And we ran into each other.
We did. Literally the only time.
We went separately and still ended up together.
Here for the Pumpkin Fest recap. I literally only went down for maybe 2 hours with my family. And we went and parked. And it's not that far a walk from my house, but I was like, screw that. If we can find a parking spot closer, then cool. If not, park at your mom's. It's still half the walking distance. And we got lucky. And we're I don't know, a couple hundred feet in the walk, and we're like, hey, that's Dennis. So we got to stop to say hi to him and his wife, Kate, and their baby boy, Jackson. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was good. Food was good. It was totally worth it. And
it's a good little towny thing.
Yeah, it was. I did get out for about 3.5 hours in that 40-mile-an-hour wind here in southern New Hampshire.
And you crushed them.
All one of them.
You crushed that one, though.
And it's funny because last week we were talking about the swim jig with the Beast Coast Miyagi swim bait on the back. Yeah. And I showed how I trimmed it down. Yeah. I had one still rigged because I've been using a lot this summer, and nothing was going on. I found 2 thick patches of grass that had fish stacked on it, mostly bait fish, but I could see a couple bigger fish. I'm like, yeah, what the hell? Tied it on, threw it. Second cast, I caught my only fish. And then nothing else would bite out of that.
Didn't let you down though.
Nope. I found a bunch of like giant schools of yellow perch and a couple of big marks relatively close to them, but nothing else would bite. And by that point, that wind was starting to just wear right through me. So I'm like, I'm done. Went home.
Fair enough.
I was happy with my one fish. I didn't get skunked, so that was the most important thing. And then the Jody White Invitational, you mean? So I do want to touch upon that really quick. So congrats to Jody White and his partner, Alec Morrison, for absolutely crushing them this weekend. 19.87 pounds, I believe, on day one at the Berkshire Fall Classic. And then 31.4 pounds, I believe, on day two. Both of those 5 fish limits. Smoked them. Absolutely just ridiculous. That is an insane bag. They've had, wow, Jesus, Jody's been part of 3 of the biggest bags out of the last 4 years that have come out of that tournament. So it's just hats off to you guys. That's friggin' incredible. Makes me not feel so bad about missing on that because, again, we're always just fishing for second when you two show up. So there's always next year. Planning on being there. Yeah, dude. Let's get into it. We got a hard stop at 9 o'clock. And honestly, blade baits, tail spins, and spoons. There's not a whole lot to talk about, but we do have plenty of examples. And it's going to be about that time of the year. It's coming sooner than a lot of us think and wish that it will be. But despite my lack of success with blade baits the last 2 years, not that I've been unsuccessful, just not getting the numbers that I typically would get, it's still, I will go out with at least 2 tied on every time. And the tailspin has actually become one of my favorite things to throw. So what do you want to start with? You want to start blade baits? Because we have that's the most common thing. We have the most examples of.
Yeah, I think it makes the most sense.
Okay,
I'm going to spend the longest on.
Continue with this trend of letting you go first because I do the whole intro thing and people get tired of hearing me.
Me too.
Have at it. I mean, everybody does, even my wife.
All right. So, well, I guess what do we want? Are we going to just jump in the baits or talk about when we want to use a blade bait or?
Let's talk about time of the year, water temperature, conditions, everything that this applies to. Then we can get into the specifics of which ones we like and why, and keep the questions rolling, and we'll address them as it goes in a timely manner.
All right. So my experience with blade baits, I always say my experience with things because I feel like I don't know everything, and I can only talk to what's worked for me. I have caught fish on blade baits in the summer when they're really deep, and when like on Winnie and Champlain and things like that, when they get out really deep, they'll work any time of year. The time where I feel like they work the best is when the water is below 50 degrees. I have had very good days when the water is in the mid 50s or low 50s, but really the time of year that we're talking about now is November, December. And then if you're fishing through the winter, like we do sometimes, or like you do all the time, and I do sometimes, then you're talking about January, February, March. And this also applies for early spring as well. But the best blade bait month, in my opinion, is November. November is when I have absolutely crushed them, and I think that they outperform anything else that you can use.
Yeah.
So really, that time of year, the fish are not everywhere. So location where you're using blade bait is really, you're using it where the fish are. When you think about what a blade bait is, they are typically either double or treble hook on them. So they are snaggy. It's basically a big metal weight with hooks. You're going to lose them. You're going to get stuck. You don't want to use them necessarily around heavy grass. You can use them around some of that little light grass, and they rip out of them pretty well. But you're mostly fishing areas that are rocky, gravelly, or transition areas where it's going from like mud to gravel or sand to gravel or mud to sand or something like that. You're not fishing them in heavy weeds. You're not fishing them necessarily directly around trees. You can fish like the edges and stuff, but you cast this near a tree, it's going to get stuck on it. So typically a deeper water, I would say deeper than 10, 15 feet.
Yeah.
As deep as you go. I've caught fish on them in 60, 65 feet with not heavy, snaggy cover. Rocks, yes. Not wood, not weeds.
No. Yeah, no, there's plenty of ponds like around our area that the conditions line up well that you could throw those in, at that time of the year. But
Yeah.
that bottom composition of that vegetation is just, you can't get around it. Like, I have yet to find a blade bait that you can work it through any of that crap. And literally every cast, you're just farming veggies.
Yeah.
And it's not worth it.
Yeah.
You got to get somewhere where you can get something clean on the bottom, because these are on the bottom. I do know guys, and I've heard this for the last like probably 12 years, guys that actually just straight swim them. And I've actually had a couple of good days doing that completely unintentionally to start.
Yeah.
Just burning it back to the boat, and all of a sudden the thing just stops. You're like, the hell? Oh. And thinking like I hooked something in the middle of the water column, like, or on my way up, thinking maybe I wasn't as high as up as I was. I came over the top of that big boulder. No, Smalley just came up and smoked it 30 feet off the bottom.
I actually know a guy who, I think he won a tournament on Newfound fishing a blade bait like that, like casting it out and just straight retrieving it back in fast.
Yep.
And like, it was just a look that nobody else had
Yeah.
in that tournament. So definitely works. Not the way that I normally fish it, but it definitely works.
Yeah, it's rare that I can make that work. And it's one of those, like, I don't necessarily try it. If I'm burning it back and I get one nibble doing that, then I immediately start working that into what I'm doing for the day. And the first time that it happened and I was able to repeat it, like, with like really, really good success, that place in Vermont, the place I always go to.
Yeah.
We took you there, and I had taken John Emery from Wicked Custom Rods out there with me, and we'd already caught a couple, but it was kind of slow. It was a like unseasonably warm day. I was looking for the pictures yesterday, trying to find a picture of the thumbnail, and it was in a t-shirt, but it was like middle of November.
Interesting.
And I already caught a couple at the bottom, and we were at like 45 feet. You could see them on the bottom. I started burning one back because I saw one below my feet, and it just stopped dead. And it was like a 4 1/4. It's like, okay. So then it happened again where I got short struck. I missed it. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I should just start swimming it. Like, so I'd bomb it out, working on the bottom a little bit, and then the last like 60-ish feet, I just do like a moderate retrieve back to the boat, and they were smoking the thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh yeah, it was great.
That's awesome. All right. So talking about baits, the thing that you have to remember about a blade bait is you are going to lose them. There's no way around it. Even if you stick to fishing it around sand and gravel and stuff like that and not any heavier cover, you're still going to lose them. It is literally a weight with a bunch of hooks on it. So it's almost like it's intended to get stuck. So you're going to lose it. The thing to remember about a blade bait is that it's all about the vibration of the blade bait. In my mind, the vibration is a bigger deal than the flash. I think that the flash does make a difference, but if you'll look at the baits that I've laid out here, none of them are flashy. Like, I would say, probably 95% of the time that I use a blade bait, I do not use one that is metallic. I don't use one that's silver or gold. I use one that is painted a certain color and is more of like a matte or painted color.
Yep.
So that is also kind of a product of when we fish them, that if you're fishing in November and December, usually the water is a little bit more murky because things are dying in it and there's just stuff in the
particulate
water.
floating around.
Right. So it's not as clear as it would be in the summer. But and also the sun is lower and things like that typically.
Yep.
So that's like a little tidbit from me to you is that almost everybody that I've seen throws silver and gold metallic blade baits. And once I switched over and started using matte colored blade baits, my catch rate went up 50 times what it was. Like I will throw, this is the one that I start with every time I go out. This is a depths circuit vibe. So the things that I'm going to talk about, most of them are JDM things, and they are a little bit more expensive than if you were to use like a silver buddy.
Bougie.
But it's a difference. Like, this is not like a depths swim bait. Like, this is not $50. I want to say that this depth circuit vibe, I think it's like $12 or $13 or something like that. So yes, it sucks when you lose $12 on something or $13 on something, but I mean, you can see this one. It's
pretty chunked
right,
up.
I beat the hell out of this one, and I've had this one, I want to say, probably for 4 years or so, and I haven't lost it.
That's
so
amazing.
The way that the depth circuit vibe has, or at least the hooks on it, it does not have full trebles. It has almost like a frog hook. It has 2 sets of those double hooks, so it's missing the treble that would be facing down. I know that it's like impossible to see, but it's missing the treble that would be on the ground when this thing is laying down on the bottom. So your chances of getting snagged with this are
Dramatically reduced.
much lower. Obviously, this thing it's not standing upright like this when it's on the bottom. It lays down. So you will still get snagged eventually. But I've had this one for years, and it's gone well. This bait in particular is not actually even metal, so it's called a circuit vibe because it's a circuit board that has lead on it, and I think that makes a big difference in this as well, because it's a different type of vibration than if you're using a silver buddy or a Binsky or even like the Megabass ones that are metal. This has a different type of vibration. It's a little bit, I don't know if subtle is the word.
I would say subdued.
Yes,
is the
exactly.
word I was thinking when you
yes.
started saying that.
It's like it still moves as much as those do, but it's like a muted, like it's not thumping as much as metal would.
Yep.
So it's just a different action, and I've found that I get a lot more bites on this one. That's my number one. Want me to go through all mine, or you want to take turns?
Let's take turns.
Okay.
You're gonna make me want to get those. So, and it's funny you talk about how the majority of other anglers, to the best of our knowledge, throws like something flashy, right? Gold or chrome plated. And for years, that's all I did. And then 2 winters ago, we got those Megabass ones, which I know you're going to show in a minute. And then I started using like actual painted patterns from Binsky. And that's when I started to have a little bit better luck. Just get away from the gold and chrome. Not to say that the gold and just straight up chrome doesn't still work, but you know, it's like anything else. Once the fish start seeing the same damn thing year in and year out, and the majority of people throw those colors, they will still work to an extent. But if you can find something similar in that vein, just a little bit different pattern presentation, it generally is going to work out a lot better for you.
I agree.
And I was starting to find that myself a little bit last year. And actually, it's funny because we went out and I caught a couple of fish on them, and I made a post. Because people are always asking what blade baits you throw. So Binsky, that's the one I've been throwing for years and my go-to. And that's what literally every single blade bait I own, with the exception of one Megabass, still is a Binsky. And dude hooked us up. I think he sent like 30 blades.
Wow.
Yeah. 3/4, half, quarter.
The Binsky?
That was it. Yep.
Like the Binsky guy?
Yeah.
Is his name Binsky?
I don't remember. But he sent us a bunch, and it was actually pretty sweet because I was really starting to dig throwing those 1/4 ounce blades on like almost like a drop shot type rod, something a little bit lighter. That was a lot of fun when I was getting fish on that.
I have some BFS ones.
Oh, all right.
It's good.
So that's touches upon your previous point and also addresses my answer to that. For my absolute favorite, it's still going to be Binsky. And I will, when I go out and I'm throwing blade baits, I keep it really simple at first, and I throw one on chrome, one rod that's got chrome, and one rod has got gold. And now, going back 2 years ago, I started throwing things a little bit differently, but definitely last year I was tying on 3 blades every time I was going out. So I had gold, I had chrome. Well, I had one or the other. And chrome on sunny days, gold on cloudy days was always my method of madness on it.
Same.
And half ounce, 3/4 ounce is nice. I like getting it down there fast, but I found I was having better luck when throwing just a half ounce Binsky blade bait. And just not having it crash right past their face so damn fast, I feel like seemed to help. And especially doing those light, low pauses or little drags.
Yep.
Where it's not just pile driving into the ground so fast. The 3/8 is actually my favorite. Half ounce very closely followed behind that. By the time I start throwing this, they're usually pretty deep. So you're trying to, and I've had a lot of good luck literally dropping it straight down like a drop shot. So you're trying to drop on a fish that you see the last second, 50 feet of water. 3/8 takes a little bit longer to get down there, especially when your line's half frozen. All your guides have ice built up on them. So half ounce is better, but I still get bit even more on 3/8. But then second to that would be the Megabass, which I know he has, but I don't have. But Binsky, and I've been using a bunch of different colors. I have just one more example out where it's this black and chartreuse. That just does really well. Smallies, loud colors, they like it. And I try not to overthink it. A lot of this ends up, for me, the last few years has come to the cadence that I'm retrieving it more than it's been the color so far.
Agreed.
But I intend on going out there with a much different approach to it this year than I have in years past. not only for the blades and tailspins and the spoons, but also for hair jigs. Like that's my goal this winter.
We
Like,
gotta have a hair jig episode too.
yeah,
I have all my hair jigs in that box.
I feel like that would be a good one for a guest, and I can just sit here and facilitate the conversation because my hair jig game is abysmal, and I'm going to change that. It's one of the last things that I have on my list of things that like I really want to just excel with and have extreme confidence in. I just haven't caught nearly enough fish to be able to talk about it. But
That's fair.
anyway, Binsky, and half ounce or 3/8 of an ounce, but like if I had to pick one, I'd go half ounce every time.
All right. My next one is the OSP Override. I wonder if can we get that? Can you see that?
Oh, actually, yeah, you can.
That's not bad. That's not
It's not bad at all.
So the cool thing about the OSP ones is that they have awesome colors, and I know that I just said that I don't think color makes a huge difference, but they have a lot of shades of color in the type of thing that I'm looking for, which is a dark or muted color shade bait. So you can see this one is like a matte perchy color, which I know Sean likes because he likes everything perch.
Literally everything perch.
And I do think that a lot of the time when fish are eating blade baits, they are down there eating crawfish. So I have very dark colors that I use for crawfish, and this is the Depths crawfish color, which is a little more orangey, kind of goldy. So that's definitely number 2. This one has a good amount more thump than the Depths does. So I will start with I probably should start with the one that has more thump, but because I have so much confidence in the Depths, I start with the Depths.
Yeah.
And then if that's not working, my rotation is basically I start there. If that's not working, I go to the OSP. If that's not working, I go to the Mega Bass. So it would be impossible to not talk about the Mega Bass.
Dude, and
so
they're good
they're very good
because of that.
Yep. So this is the Mega Bass Dyna Response, which is one of the cheapest things price-wise that Mega Bass makes. The thing that makes this one stand out, so there are cool color profiles and things like that they have on this. They have clown color, which is awesome. They have this fire tiger, which is awesome for perch. The thing that really makes it stand out, like the bait itself is not, it looks exactly the same as other blade baits. It's not going to do anything crazy. It's the tail on the end, that the feathered tail on the end of this gives it it does 2 things really. It gives it a different action in the water where your normal blade bait, as you're pulling it through the water, is basically coming through doing this. And it's kind of like a crankbait action, but moving upwards. And when you do that with this tail on the back, that tail is basically slowing down. It's kind of like a rudder, and it's slowing down the action of that bait. So it's actually a different type of vibration where when you're moving these, it'll kind of and go up at, like, almost all of them will go up at that same vibration. Like I said, how hard that vibration hits kind of depends on if you have a metal bait or a circuit bait, but that will be different. It's slower with the Mega Bass because that tail slows it down. So if they're not hitting one of those baits where you're pulling it up and it's really vibrating quickly, try the Mega Bass one because it just vibrates. It still vibrates hard, but it vibrates slower because of that tail. The other thing that the tail does is it somewhat stops your bait from hanging up on your line. So one of the things that's the biggest pain when you're fishing a blade bait is when you cast it, the bait will kind of spin and roll over, and the treble hooks will hook your line, and it'll basically destroy your cast.
Yep.
And what I have found is that that tail causes it to fly in a certain way because the tail is obviously going to be slower than the head because it has more air resistance. So it's basically flying head first away from you, and it's keeping those hooks a little bit more away from your line as you're casting it. So it's kind of like a guard to reduce the amount of times that you get fouled on your line when you're casting. I think that's it.
Yeah. And so pinning comments here as you were talking, well, pinning them, starring them so we can go back to it. And Jamie, how you doing, buddy? From Smatus Baits, Bass Pro Shops, XPS, laser blade is all you need. You give him Bass too much credit. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that is that more slender profile, top to bottom, it's shallow.
Yep.
I hate those.
Yeah.
They're great for vertical dropping, but when you cast them out, almost every single goddamn time, that treble hook loops up over the top of the body and gets fouled up.
Yeah, and I mean, there like a lot of people feel that way, and I used to feel that way. Like I used to only use silver buddies. Like I would
Yeah.
get literally, I would buy them like a 50 pack on eBay, and there would be certain days, a lot of days, where you would go out and be like, they're just not biting a blade bait today.
Yep.
And this now that I have kind of expanded the arsenal to these, like there are days where you could go out and throw a hot dog and they'll eat it.
Yeah.
But with these things, I've gotten to a point where I can go out in the fall and catch a blade bait or catch a blade bait, catch a fish on a blade bait basically on any day. Like there isn't a situation where I don't have confidence that I can get a fish, even if they're not biting blade baits that day. Like I can find something that works.
Yeah.
Whereas before it would be like, they're just not biting a blade bait today, and I'll try something else. Like now I can get those fish to bite. And there have been days where I've been using the depths or the OSP or the mega bass and not getting anything. And it's like, I'll try this other color. This is actually how I discovered the depths, was that I was using a mega bass one because I got those first and didn't get anything for like 3 hours. And I was like, I have this depths one sitting here. I'll try it. Tried it, and it was like, oh, it's a different vibration, and immediately caught a fish, and then caught another fish, and then caught another fish, and then ended up catching like 15 on it.
Yep.
But not a single bite on the mega bass one. So it was like, you have to experiment with those things.
Yeah, agreed. Massing and bassing. Are the tassels on the mega bass a teaser or attached to a treble?
It is attached directly to the bait. It's not attached to the treble. So it's basically like epoxied in. Does look like it's tied through the like an eye on the back of the bait, and then it's epoxied around that. So not connected to the hook at all.
Yep. I'm trying to think. If there's any, like I'm being mindful of the time. It's 8:30. We're still gonna talk about spoons and tail spins. Let me double check these comments because there is that one's good. Actually, Mark's got a great one, and this goes perfect for everything we're talking about. Doesn't matter which one of these three you're throwing: tailspin, blade bait, or spoon. He's absolutely right. You go into throwing blade baits knowing you'll lose a few. When it comes to jigs, I really like my rule of 3. It really is like a rule of 2. If you have 1, you have none. If you have 2, you have 1. With blade baits, it's really if you have 3, you have 1.
Yeah.
Because typically the time of the year you're throwing these, rocks is really where you're gonna get most of them. There are times we've done really well just getting them like a nice clean hard packed bottom, nowhere near the rocks, but generally in or just on the very edge of rocks is where we excel with these. And you are going to lose a lot.
Yep.
And you have to be prepared for that, both emotionally and financially.
Yep.
You're going to lose so many blade baits.
Yep.
But the best areas to throw them are in the rocks. So I know every time, beginning of November onward, right until basically February, and that's when I start really going to other things and going to places that don't really play well for me down the Cape for a blade bait anyway.
Yeah.
That
efficient shallower and
yeah. But on those, that 3-month really period of November, December, January, I'm probably going to lose 10 to 15 blade baits, like minimum.
Oh, at least.
At least. And that's what I like about the Binskis. Even though they're not cheap, they're not super expensive.
Right.
So I like starting with those first because if it works, then great. I have a ton of them, and that was even before he hooked us up and sent a big shipment. But it's just that I could stomach that loss a little bit better.
Yeah.
That Mega Bass one, I bought 4 initially, and now they're all gone. But the last one was when Andrew caught that catfish. No, then there was a pike after that. So the second to last one.
That'll do it.
And the other ones we lost in the rocks. And
it happens.
Yeah.
But you have to think about that. Like, it's a good point that if you try one of these, like, order multiples, because what's going to happen is you might cast that out and literally your first cast is gone.
Yep.
And then it's like, well, there goes that. But and that's not the worst thing. The worst thing is you go out there and you catch 10 fish and you realize they're crushing it, and then you lose it, and then it's like,
yes.
So, and like I said, there are days where one works tenfold better than the other. So I have a stock of the color. Like, you will find that there are colors that you like. You don't need 50 colors of them.
No.
You'll find that there's 2 or 3 colors that you really like, and buy like 5 of each of those, because there might be a day out there where they're really biting it and you lose 4 of those 5. So just be prepared for that. Like anything else, like you wouldn't go out with 1 drop shot worm. You would go out with 100 drop shot worms.
Right. Yeah. Yep. I'm going to say, you know what? All of my gear I use for this is pretty much identical. So I don't think we need to cover that yet. We can cover that at the end.
Mine is as well.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. All right, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Any other questions about blade baits? Now's the time. Otherwise, we're going to move into, do you want to do spoons or tailspins? I have like literally nothing to add on the spoon conversation. Tailspins though. Knock out spoons.
Yeah, because I only have one tailspin that I'm going to talk about. All right, so spoons, really quick. The time that I like using spoons. So I only brought out 2 spoons here. One of them is, I don't even know what the name of this is. It is a Ryugi drag metal cast. Not Ryugi, Duo. I don't know why I said Ryugi. It has a Ryugi hook on it. It's a duo drag metal cast. So this is a, thank you.
Hey, you're welcome.
So it is a little jigging spoon that has a treble hook on the bottom and it has a teaser hook up top. It kind of looks like a very small version of what you would use for like a tuna. And the reason why I really like that one is that gets to the bottom in like a second. And there have been days where we're striper fishing in the winter that I have done very, very well on that bait, that exact bait actually that you're holding, and have caught many stripers on it. But I've also caught a ton of smallmouth on it. I've caught a lot of Lakers on it. So when the fish are in very deep water, I would say 60 plus, it can be a pain to fish a blade bait in that deep of water because it can take a long time for it to get down there.
Yeah, when it falls, it's like whoop, whoop,
exactly,
whoop, whoop, the whole way down.
Right. So in those situations, I'll start with something like this, a jigging spoon that will get down there, and I fish it almost exactly the same. And I know we haven't talked about how we fish blade baits, but basically how I fish a blade bait is you get it down to the bottom, and my starting technique is I lift it up just enough until I feel it start to vibrate. I lift it until I feel, and then I stop. And it goes. So I'm probably lifting it that high off the bottom. I'm not pulling it 5 feet in the air. It's and then back and then back. And there are some days where that you want to do more than that, and some days you want to do less than that, and some days you want to let it sit 10 seconds between pulls, and some days you want to let it sit 1 second between. And that's some of the things you have to work with, kind of like a jerkbait.
All about that cadence.
Right. And I fish this exactly the same way. So this does kind of go back and forth on the fall, but if you kind of thumb the spool or something as you're dropping it, it will plummet down there. The only other spoon that I want to talk about, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is the Savage Gear line through bait fish spoon. I only know the whole title because we're looking at it on another screen right here. This is a spoon basically that I found by accident, where I bought this a long time ago before I really got into blade bait fishing. And I actually think I bought it for saltwater. And there was a day where I was fishing on a place that Sean and I like very much, and was struggling to get them on a blade bait. But I felt like that was the right type of thing to do. So I put on this spoon, and basically this spoon is just a piece of metal with a line through it. And essentially what you do is you route your line through the spoon and you tie a treble hook, you put a bead and you tie a treble hook to the bottom of it. And as this falls, so that does 2 things. As this falls, basically the spoon is totally, I guess, not pulled in any direction. Like it's not, you don't have a swivel that's guiding a certain side of it, and you don't have a hook that's connected to the other side of it. So your spoon is totally on its own, and the only thing that's hindering its action is your line. So if you drop this on a free line and you don't thumb it at all and you just let it go, it has a very crazy wide fall, and it takes a long time to get to the bottom. And actually what I was telling Sean right before we started this was the first time that I actually used this, I almost immediately caught like a 5-pound largemouth on it in an area where I'd fished through with multiple blade baits and haven't gotten anything. And I assume it was because that much slower action as it was falling. The other thing that the line through does is it reduces the chances of the fish being able to throw the bait, because you're hooking it on a relatively small treble hook, and the fish has absolutely no leverage, because as soon as the fish shakes, the spoon just slides up your line, and the only thing that's in the fish's mouth is a hook, which weighs essentially nothing. So
Right.
the fish basically has no leverage. So once you hook them, they don't come unhooked.
They lose all their mechanical advantage to ruin
Exactly.
your day.
Yep.
The only thing I have to add about spoons is this $3.50 Castmaster.
Excellent.
I bought this the very first time I went down to Cape Cod. I had to think about that for a second. I'm positive it was the very first time I ever went down there to fish in the winter with my buddy Steve Goodman and at Mashpee Wakeby. You know, there's nothing special. God Christ, everybody fishes that lake. So there's nothing special about it. And I really hadn't done a lot of like true winter fishing to that point. I'm like, what are we doing? He goes, go to the store, buy any like chrome spoon you can get and put a feathered treble on it. And honest to God, I don't even remember where the hell I got this feathered treble because it didn't come with it. But this is original. It's been living in my blade box and I've done nothing with it. But I did catch quite a few fish that day with him on it. So that's my spoon experience. A $3.50 Castmaster. I think it's a 3/4 ounce too. And no, I'm trying to get more into the spoons, but now I'm fishing like 5, 6, and 7-inch spoons.
Yeah.
I'm swinging
different kinds of things. Different kinds of things.
Yeah. And I did go back and look. I say I did. Chris did as well. Nothing else left in the blades except for massing and bassing. You guys are fishing these blades in your swim bait rods, right? So there was one year we went to the New England Fishing Expo when Dan Kenny, the current owner, he was still doing it, and I think it was Mac Daddy Lures. It was like for early entrance,
Daddy Mac.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And for like an early entrance for the first like 500 people, whatever, you got this, what was essentially like a 6-ounce blade bait, but for stripers or something.
Nice.
And dude, it was huge. And Andrew and I went out one year and he kept this. For the life of me, I have no idea where mine went. I had it for years and then at some point it disappeared. And we went out. I see him grab his swim bait rod. I'm like, didn't even think anything. It was like, interesting. And then I could hear like a clang clang. And I look back and he tied it on. He's just smiling like an idiot. And he tried throwing it. And it was about one of the funniest things I've ever seen. He dropped it straight down. And he went to go like lift it. And the rod was just like, whomp. So in some cases, yes, we are using swim bait rods.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It was pretty funny. And then I think he ended up snagging it in the bottom and breaking it off because it's like 20-pound line. So
yeah, that'll do it.
Yep. Okay, so that's blade baits, that's spoons. So let's rip through tailspins and then we can talk about, there's a question. I mean, you covered really time of the year, water temperature and everything.
Yep.
You really covered the areas too. So we just didn't talk about gear, tailspins and gear. So my turn for a second, and I want to make sure, let's start with my favorite one. So tailspins, I've only started fishing for about the last 3 seasons. And I am a huge fan of these because it's just a slightly different variation of a blade bait in my opinion. But what you end up getting, this little, oh God, I'm going to have to get up and show you this in a second, or you can look it up. It is a much more lifelike profile in a smaller package. Almost every tailspin that I have. So blade bait, literally as the name implies, it is a blade that is a bait. And it's a piece of stamped metal, or in your case, for one of those, a circuit board, and then weight is attached to it. Versus on a tailspin, all the weight comes from the body of the bait itself. And the patterns on a lot of these I found are actually really, really good. So that's what I like about them. Not only is it a more lifelike profile, but you get very good natural patterns out of these a lot more often too. And my first one that I ever started fishing that I really like a lot is the Molex Trago Spintail. And it's got a little Colorado blade on it. You can get it with a willow blade on it as well. And I mean, it's tiny. It's teeny tiny. For comparison's sake, best I can do, pretty sure that's a 3/4 ounce Binsky. And then you've got, that's kind of hard to see, but you got to get the idea that the entirety of that Molex is smaller than the Binsky. But man, dude, I tell you what, these things cast a mile. And I fish them the exact same way. The only difference when getting at this is not only do I feel that more often than not, I get better, more natural patterns out of this, or just, that's the best way to put it. But playing around with that different blade, you get a different kind of thump out of it versus, blade bait, depending upon how vigorously you are lifting it, you do get some vibration out of it, some sound producing vibration out of it. And then when it hits, it's kind of like a clang versus when this hits, because it's much more dense, smaller, same weight, so it's all more centered into one focal point. It's more like a thud. It's just a slightly different variation from fishing a blade bait. So that's where, and I will fish them literally at the same time. I have yet with my, 3 seasons of experience using both the tailspin and the blade baits. I really haven't found a time yet where it seems like one is clearly better than the other because of this. It's that because of that I don't have enough experience with yet that I can definitively say, oh, it was because of that or this. I throw them both in the exact same areas, and some days they want one versus the other. And there hasn't been any consistency into what, really dictated that. Didn't matter if it's cloudy or sunny. There's been just as many like completely cloudy days where they both excelled and is equal many days as the other as there was on sunny days.
It's funny that you say that because I was literally going to ask because I don't use them. I use them sometimes.
Yep.
But I only use basically this one and not nearly as much as you. And I was going to ask when you use those over a blade bait because I've never found a reason why, like, oh, in this condition, I do way better with the tailspin than like,
right.
It's normally like, oh, if I'm catching them on a blade bait, I can tie this on and get a couple extra ones or vice versa.
Yeah. Again, I haven't really run into any situations where like, oh, okay, that makes sense as to why this worked better. The only thing I can confidently kind of guess at this point is later in the season, this is when the tailspin really starts to shine. I think it's because not that many people throw them up here versus everybody throws a bladed jig. And thinking back on it now, my best days with this, my most consistent days of success with the tailspin has been later into the winter. So at that point, now you're talking 4-6 weeks into blade bait season, and I'm fishing behind all those people with essentially the same approach, just a different presentation to it.
Makes sense.
So that's the only thing I can speak to, but I'm gonna have to really be cognizant of that as I go out there this winter and see if I can't, really kind of make that connection for you. Right behind that, I think you and I have the exact same one, and for the life of me, I have too many of these, so I can't remember. The Duo Realist Spin. Oh my God, these are so small. You're gonna have to look them up. The Duo Realist Spin. You're gonna do it?
I have the same one.
Okay, so slightly different. That Molex is one single treble hook versus where on the Duo Realist, like, usually you do hand first, like cover the whole camera, then back up. Don't let it see me.
Get out of here.
You'll figure it out.
It's just going to be my hand for the rest of the show.
Bring it closer to your hand. Your hand's in focus. Yeah, now we're talking.
There you go. That's what it looks like.
So, same principle on this, right? It's a lifelike bait. It's got the right profile. It actually has meat to it because it does have profile versus a stamped piece of steel. A lot of different color options on this. So, like, this to me almost looks like a very juvenile perch, which is why I like it. Of course, like me, yellow perch, they go hand in hand. It still has that Colorado type blade on it. And this has 2 treble hooks on it versus that Molex only has a single. Again, like literally all the rest of my tailspins are pretty much the same thing over and over, just slightly different profiles. Like this could pass for both juvenile bluegill and a juvenile yellow perch. This really just kind of passes as juvenile bluegill. Going forward, I need to make sure. Was that the Demiki one? Yep. Then I have the Demiki Axe Blade Tail Spinner. That's my smelt. It's got the right profile. It's got the right color combo. It's got that bigger. I guess it's like a willow blade. Yeah, it's a willow blade. It's kind of a stout willow blade though. On that,
it's a big willow blade. For
yeah,
that.
it's beefy.
It's big for a tailspin.
Yeah, it is. But I've done really well on that. But like that's a lot of flash.
Yeah.
But if I'm working around smelt,
it makes sense.
It makes a lot of
Big
sense,
flash.
and that's why I got that smelt pattern on that. So that works really well. And then last but not least, for something that's kind of in between everything and goes in line with that inline spoon he was talking about, I have, that is not it, not that one. Yeah, the Blade Runner Through Tail Spin. Yeah, sorry. Wow, Blade Runner Line Through Tail Spin. I like this. So the line through is actually right behind the eye towards the head of the bait. And it comes with pretty stout treble hooks. It's just a slightly different profile. The colors on this are a little bit more simplified. I have this one that's kind of a yellow perch. I mean, it's green, white, a little bit of orange. They have a really good rainbow trout. They have a blue and white, which seems to do better on lakes that have alewives for some reason. That color works well in the winter. And slightly different profile. Like that doesn't really look like anything per se, but that's also kind of the beauty of it because it's just kind of neutral in its overall profile, and then you can kind of cater your color schemes to the specific type of bait fish that you're going for, or different conditions, depending upon your lighting conditions. Maybe you want something really loud, maybe you want something a little bit more subdued. Blue just seems to do better in cold water, and I believe a lot of that has to do with the amount of light penetration or the lack thereof at that point of the year, coupled with that stained water from all the particulate dying and just building to that stain that just makes it hard for them to see, especially on the bottom. So like that's all my tailspins in general. But again, I'm throwing them at the exact same time I'm throwing my blade baits. And I really, later in the season, they seem to work a little bit better. So that would support the theory that it's because all these fish have seen a million freaking blade baits at that point. And it's doing the same exact thing. I'm fishing the exact same way. I'm not doing anything different between a tailspin and a blade bait. But yeah, those are all the ones that I use. I don't think I left any of those out. No, I did. I covered them all.
I like it.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything to add. You use more than I do. You know more about them than I do. I like the duo one a lot. I fish them the exact same way that you do. I literally have nothing to add.
Sweet.
Well said.
Hey, thanks, man. They want to know, Dennis, where are you getting these? Where are you getting your blade baits primarily?
I mean, I buy most of my stuff from either Peterborough Pro Tackle or the Hookup Tackle. A lot, like we're looking at these on Tackle Warehouse on the other screen too. So Tackle Warehouse has all this stuff too. It just will take them 3 weeks to mail it to you.
Yeah, seriously. I will say that the last probably 2 or 3 orders of what I needed for Binsky blade baits, I got from Ben's Tackle Shack. And he carries a ton of the Binskys down there in his in the shop in Leicester, Mass. I believe you can get them online too. And he covers like a lot of the different colors, all the primary sizes. So if you guys are interested and you ever need something in a pinch, you just want to go look, that's where you want to go. The only thing we have left to cover is gear. And we'll wrap this up on time.
I like it.
You first. What is your primary go-to rod line reel setup?
I can't wait to talk about it. All right, so you can fish these obviously on spinning or casting gear. I have done well in the past using a jerkbait rod basically for these, but the past 5-ish years, what I have been using is a spinning rod, and specifically it's the, of course, Megabass P5 Windbuster. And ironically,
I'll be back while you're talking about this.
Okay, so ironically, what are you pooping? Is that what you're doing? Okay. Ironically, what the Windbuster is, it's called a Windbuster. I know this is not a Megabass show, but it's called a Windbuster because it's intended to be a rod for throwing things like jerkbaits in the wind when it's a pain to throw it on casting gear. So it is kind of like a spinning jerkbait rod. But what I have found, yes, so that is for blade baits. So this spoon, I think it only weighs 3/4 of an ounce, and the line through spoon is only half an ounce. So these aren't that heavy, and the Windbuster loads up better with things that are between, I would say, 3/8 and 3/4 of an ounce. So it's a powerful rod. It's a spinning rod, but it's a powerful rod, and it's the same rod that I use for things like shaky heads and stuff like that as well. You can use open water snipers on it as well. But it's very, very, very good for this because it does have a tip, and you don't really lose fish when you hook them on that rod because of the way that it plays fish. The reason why I like using a spinning rod over a casting rod for these is the ability to basically go full free spool on something. What I found with a casting rod is that it wasn't necessarily the rod that was the problem. It was the reel that became kind of a hinder to me, because a lot of times you get bites on these immediately when you engage the reel and you go to lift up, there's just a fish on it. And the reason why you do that, and I noticed that once I switched to a spinning rod, the reason why you do that or the reason why that happens is because as these are falling, if they are free spool, like what I was talking about with the line through uh, blade or the line through spoon, is that they have a lot of action and they flutter a lot if they're free spooled. If you have any tension on that line, it limits that, and it has no action, and it's just like a weight going straight down to the bottom, and it doesn't have that flutter, and you're not going to get a lot of bites when it's just doing this to the bottom. So you want to try to free spool these as you're obviously it's a pain if you're fishing in like 60 feet of water, but under normal conditions when you're fishing 15 or 20 or 30 feet of water or something like that, it's a good technique to try to free spool these as they fall. So having a spinning rod really allows you to do that, more so because of the reel than the rod. When it comes to the reel, doesn't really matter specifically which reel you're using. I like the Daiwa Tatula reels. I have a lot of those. I also like the Shimano Vanford, I think it's called. I actually like that more than the Tatula, so I'm switching over a lot of my reels to that one. When it comes to line, so the line size itself, I think, is not super critical on these because it's not like a drop shot or a Ned rig or something like that where the fish are going to get line shy because they can see your line. Like these things are reaction bites, which is why you want to get that action, that fluttering action. Like they're biting it kind of they're sitting there on the bottom and this thing's fluttering by its face, and it's kind of like a reaction that they bite it, or it lands, they go over to it, and then as soon as you lift it, that's what triggers them, which is why usually the technique for these is you let it sit on the bottom, you go just a little bit, because a lot of times when it's sitting on the bottom, there's a fish looking right at it. And if you lift that up 6 feet, you're lifting it right away from that fish. But if you lift it up 6 inches, it's right in that fish's, like right in their grill. So the line that I specifically use is 12-pound braid, and then I'll go to either like 10 or 12 pounds fluorocarbon leader on this. Like I said, I don't think it matters. I don't think you need like 6 pounds or anything like that.
God, no, you're not going light line on that.
Right. That's it. You had good timing.
That was perfect. Okay, so I keep mine really, really simple, and trying to think. I have tried it on straight casting gear, and it really depends on the time of the year and the conditions I'm facing. If I do that, I don't like to if I can avoid it, because typically I'm fishing in really deep water, so I like to go braid to fluoro leader. Otherwise, there's actually been a number of days where you get a dead stick these things on the bottom and leave them pause for like even up to 30 seconds, and you'll feel the lightest little tick. And I'm convinced that if I was going straight fluorocarbon on a bite like that in 50 feet of water on a decent cast, I'm not going to be able to feel that. So I got to go braid to leader on those. Not to say, like, if you're fishing, I'm going to say like earlier in the year,
like a jig.
Earlier in the year, like at this time of the year where you're throwing these things, yeah, if you're like 30 feet, yeah, you can get away with it. Later in the year, if you're fortunate enough to say find a body of water where you can still get them in 30 to 40 feet, and especially vertical jigging, but it's cold out, like air temp is really cold, the water temp's really cold, so like your rod starts icing over really easily, dude, it's hard to manage that with braid to fluoro leader.
Yeah,
it's
true.
Really, really hard.
Yep.
So it is a lot easier. So one of two ways: either you tie on a really extra long leader and have at least still a little braid hanging in the water, or if you're fortunate, you're still like maybe say 40 feet max, you're doing a lot more vertical drop with these than you are casting, then you can get away with a casting setup. But for the most part, I like right now, my go-to is the 724 XF from Douglas, their X Matrix or their LRS line. It's a 7.2 medium heavy extra fast rod.
Is it spinning?
It is spinning. But no, I take that back. They do not have actually, you know what? In the new ERA series, they do have a 7.4 medium heavy fast rod that I think would actually also be suitable for this. It's a little stiff. So if you're going to use a casting rod like that, like I would like come way back down on your drag on that and let your drag help you out. But that 724 XF, again, either the X Matrix or the LRS series, phenomenal. Just using straight Defiant lines. So in this case, because I don't like changing out my braid too often, I think I'm using their 40-pound braid which sounds really heavy, but the line diameter on it is actually pretty thin. And I usually do that just to a straight 12 pound, 11.6 pound heavy cover fluorocarbon from Defiant as well. I've used 10 pound and that's been fine, but I've really never found days, like it's been rare where I felt like I had to go down on my line diameter that it was going to make a
I
difference.
said the same thing before you got back here. They're
Okay.
Like, these are reaction bites.
Yeah, 100%.
Line size doesn't really matter for this.
Yeah. So I, just 12 pound, because more often than not, like I said, you're bouncing them around rocks. So you need to work around that. And especially if you're in places like Vermont that have a ton of zebra mussels, although I'm not sure how well those do in the winter. If they're like,
do they die?
I don't know. It's actually a really good question. I would assume that the shells are still there regardless.
Yeah.
I mean, based on this, like the way our line looks, when we kind of get hung up, we get it back, they're still there.
Yeah, I wonder if they're alive though.
That's a good question. Freeze warning, Vermont. Damn. I like 12 pound. Anywhere from say 20 to 40 pound braid to 12 pound fluorocarbon leader, and you're happy. It just works for me really well. And reel size, it doesn't really matter. I've used a 2000 or 200, depending on, 20, 200, or 2000, depending upon what brand you're going with. They all do it a little bit differently. And that's been fine. 3,000 for me is kind of that sweet spot. 4,000 is definitely overkill, but still is really nice, especially when you're doing a lot more vertical dropping. That bigger spool diameter, I feel like just kind of helps the line pop out more freely and a lot more easily. I will say that my plan for this year is I bought like 2 of the big spools of braid from Defiant, and I have barely scratched the surface on these because it's not like you go through a ton of braid really that fast.
Yeah.
And
keep it on there all year.
Yeah.
Sometimes more than 1 year.
That's typically what I would do.
Yeah.
I would leave it on there for 2 or 3 years and then replace it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that this year because that line is really kind of like waxy coated, right?
Yeah.
For that braid. So I am going to, at the very end of this month, I'm going to reline all of my reels with all new braid and then go out there and I'm really hoping that the newer line that still kind of has that waxy substance and coating to it is not going to absorb just a little bit of water that makes it stiffer and really freaking hard to cast.
Yeah.
When you get in that cold weather.
Maybe it won't freeze. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. And that's the worst. Like when we're out there, basically from the beginning of December all the way through until like middle of March, and you're trying, like it's blowing just a little bit. You're not getting a lot of sun. The air temperatures are like high 20s, and you go to cast. Your bait barely goes anywhere, and you just get like this ice. It's just it comes out of your reel, and it's like the first cast isn't usually too bad. It's like by the 5th or 6th cast, if you've soaked that line a little bit and you start reeling it in, you got snow, like especially on a casting reel, as all the ice and snow builds up on like in the
and your worm guide and all that. So, yeah.
It's just a nightmare.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm gonna give that a shot and see how much that helps, and then at that point, like it should be good enough to last me through the winter, and then I know it's definitely good enough to go the rest of the year into
and you don't have to worry
the
about
next
freezing.
winter. Yeah, right. And I'm gonna see if that timing helps me out a little bit better versus relining it in the spring.
I like it.
Makes a lot more sense.
I like it.
And then almost, whatever spinning reel. Like if I'm using a casting setup, I treat it like a jig, right? Because all the action is being done by the rod, and I use the same cadences, doing the exact same thing that Dennis said. Although I will alternate between like vertical lift, just enough to feel a little vibration, kill it, and a sweeping motion. So you're either kind of getting off the bottom in these nice little hopping arcs, or you're just getting it to scurry along the bottom a little bit. And there's been days where it is definitively they're biting it one way or the other. That's the only thing I can add to that. 8:59.
Very good. Did we miss any major questions?
No, I think we got everything. There was one very early that I thought we missed, but you did address it early on. I think the question came up before then. So pretty sure we got it all done, buddy.
I like it.
Up top. Nice job. Yes. So thank you all for watching. Greatly appreciate it. I totally forgot to ask at the very beginning. So before you go, please leave a like, whether you're watching here on Facebook or YouTube. Does not matter. It helps immensely. We appreciate you guys for doing that. We're almost very, 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 very close to 8,000 subscribers on the channel too.
It's not bad.
No, very excited about that. So for those that have been sharing it, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That is literally the biggest thing to help us grow. I do have another new video going up on Friday this week. I'll make sure that is up. It's all done and edited, so I just need to figure out what to do for the thumbnail for this, and I'll have that up. And it's basically breaking down a new lake with electronics. In this case, I actually tell about the lake that I'm at, because it's Winnisquam, and nobody gives a crap about Winnisquam.
Yeah, that's true.
So
everybody go to Winnisquam.
it was it was a good amount of like trying to record my screen and showing like my side imaging, my down imaging, my sonar, my map, and explaining like the wheres and whys of everything I'm looking at, what I was seeing, and how I identify that it is what I'm seeing. Like I know that's a rock because of this. I know it's vegetation because of this, and etc.
I like that.
So I'm looking forward to see how well that one does, and hopefully you guys find it very interesting and helpful. Other than that, we'll see you guys
Every week, Wednesday, 8 p.m., youtube.com/@ReelNorthernBass.
Good job.
Nailed it.
Yep. Everybody have a wonderful night. Catch you next week.